The cool autumn breeze ruffled through 12-year-old Darius's hair as he pedaled his new bike through Riverdale Park. The bike had been a birthday gift from his grandparents just 2 weeks ago. A shiny blue mountain bike with silver spokes that caught the sunlight as they spun. Darius couldn't help smiling as he navigated the winding path that served as his shortcut home from his best friend's house. The park was alive with weekend activity. Dog walkers chatted in small groups, children climbed on the playground equipment, and joggers pounded the paved trails. Darius waved to Mr. Wilson, the elderly man who fed the ducks every Saturday without fail. This was his neighborhood. He knew its rhythms and faces just as well as he knew the back of his hand. Darius checked his watch. 4:15 p.m. His mom expected him home by 4:30 for dinner with his aunt and uncle who were visiting from out of town. He had plenty of time but decided to pick up the pace anyway, standing up on his pedals as he approached the gentle slope that led toward the park's eastern exit. That's when he saw the police cruiser pull across the bike path about 50 yards ahead. At first, Darius thought there might be some kind of emergency. He slowed down, gripping his handbrakes and coming to a stop a respectful distance away. The cruiser's door opened and Officer Brennan stepped out. Even from this distance, Darius could see the man's stern expression. "Hey, you there! Stay right where you are," the officer called out, his voice carrying across the park space between them. Darius froze, his heart suddenly racing. He looked around, thinking the officer must be calling to someone else. There was nobody near him on the path. "Me?" he called back, pointing to himself. "Yes, you. Don't move." Officer Brennan strode toward him with purpose, one hand resting on his belt near his holster. The officer was tall, with cropped brown hair and a face that seemed permanently set in a frown. His badge caught the sunlight as he approached. Darius felt his mouth go dry. He'd been taught by his parents what to do if stopped by police. Be respectful, move slowly, keep your hands visible. But he couldn't understand why he was being stopped at all. "What's your name? What are you doing in this neighborhood?" Officer Brennan demanded, standing uncomfortably close now. "I'm Darius, sir. I live on Maple Street, just 3 blocks from here," Darius answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm just heading home from my friend's house." The officer's eyes narrowed. "Let me see some ID." "I don't have any ID, sir. I'm 12. Darius could feel a flutter of panic rising in his chest. He tried to remember everything his parents had taught him about these situations. 12, huh? And what's in the backpack? Officer Brennan pointed to the small blue backpack Darius wore. "Just my water bottle and my math homework, sir." "Take it off." Slowly. Darius carefully removed his backpack, his hands trembling slightly. A few people nearby had begun to notice the interaction. An older woman walking her golden retriever slowed her pace, watching with concern. "Place it on the ground and step back," Officer Brennan instructed. Darius did as he was told, confused and increasingly frightened. The officer picked up the backpack, unzipped it, and dumped its contents onto the grass. A water bottle, a math textbook, a folder with worksheets, and a half-eaten chocolate bar. "Sir, may I ask what this is about?" Darius tried to keep his voice respectful despite the humiliation of having his belongings scattered on the ground. "We've had reports of break-ins in the area. Someone matching your description was seen trying car doors on Elm Street an hour ago." Darius felt his stomach drop. "But I was at my friend Tyler's house playing video games." "His mom can tell you. We were there since noon." The officer seemed unmoved. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back." "What? Why?" Darius couldn't help the panic that crept into his voice now. "Don't argue with me, boy. Turn around." With shaking legs, Darius turned around. Within seconds, he felt the cold metal of handcuffs close around his wrists. The sensation was alien and terrifying. He bit his lip hard to keep from crying. By now, a small crowd had begun to gather. A woman in a red jogging suit had stopped and was filming with her phone. 2 men near the playground were walking over, their faces showing concern. "Officer, is that really necessary?" "He's just a kid," one of the men called out. "Please step back, sir. This is police business," Officer Brennan replied without looking up. He led Darius to the curb. "Sit down." Darius sat, the concrete cold beneath him. The handcuffs bit into his wrists. He could feel eyes on him from all directions, and hot tears of embarrassment and fear threatened to spill. What would happen now? Would he be taken to jail? His parents would be worried sick when he didn't come home. "I didn't do anything wrong," Darius said quietly, his voice breaking. "Please check with Tyler's mom." Her number is in my phone in the side pocket of my backpack. Officer Brennan ignored his request, instead radioing in. Dispatch, this is Officer Brennan. I've detained a possible suspect in the Elm Street break-ins. Juvenile black male, approximately 5'3", blue bicycle, backpack. The woman in the red jogging suit had moved closer, her phone still recording. Excuse me, officer. I'm a resident here and I walk through this park every day. This young man is from the neighborhood. I've seen him riding his bike to school. Ma'am, please stay back, Officer Brennan said firmly. Can you at least tell us what evidence you have that he was involved in any break-ins? She persisted. More people were gathering now. Darius recognized Mrs. Chen from the bakery, and Mr. Patel, who ran the corner store where he sometimes bought candy. They knew him. They knew he wasn't a criminal. This is ridiculous, another voice called out. A tall man in glasses had joined the growing crowd. You can't just handcuff a child with no evidence. Officer Brennan's posture stiffened. If everyone doesn't back up right now, I'll have to call for backup. Darius felt a tear slide down his cheek. He tried to wipe it on his shoulder, not wanting everyone to see him cry. His wrists hurt from the handcuffs, but the pain was nothing compared to the shame of sitting there like a criminal, while neighbors he'd known his whole life watched. Can someone call my mom? He asked, his voice small. An elderly woman stepped forward. What's her number, honey? I'll call her right now. Before Darius could answer, Officer Brennan interrupted. No one is calling anyone until I finish my investigation. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, more disapproving. This is wrong, and you know it, said a man in a business suit who had stopped his evening jog to witness the scene. Darius spotted a familiar face making her way through the crowd. Ms. Rivera, a lawyer who lived 2 houses down from his family. She'd helped his mom with paperwork when they'd bought their house last year. Ms. Rivera approached calmly, her voice measured but firm. Officer, I'm Elena Rivera, attorney at law. May I ask what probable cause you have for detaining and handcuffing this child? Officer Brennan's jaw tightened. This doesn't concern you, ma'am. I believe it does. This is Darius from Maple Street. He's my neighbor's son and has no history of criminal behavior. You need reasonable suspicion to detain someone, and handcuffing a minor without clear evidence of a crime is excessive force. More phones were out now, recording the interaction. Darius could hear whispers spreading through the crowd. His embarrassment deepened, but a small spark of hope ignited as people continued to speak up for him. If you have reasonable suspicion, state it clearly, Ms. Rivera continued. Otherwise, I suggest you remove those handcuffs immediately. Officer Brennan's radio crackled to life. Brennan, what's your status? We've got the suspect in the break-ins. Teen male, white, red hoodie, apprehended on West End with stolen items in possession. The crowd fell silent. All eyes turned to Officer Brennan, whose face had drained of color. Darius felt his heart pounding in his chest. They'd caught the actual person responsible, and it wasn't him. It wasn't even someone who looked like him. Ms. Rivera's eyes narrowed. I believe that clarifies the situation, officer. Please remove the handcuffs from this child immediately. For a moment, Officer Brennan seemed frozen, caught between pride and the undeniable fact that he had made a serious error. The crowd waited, tension thick in the air. Finally, without a word, he moved behind Darius and unlocked the handcuffs. The relief of pressure on his wrists was immediate, but the humiliation lingered. Can I go home now? Darius asked quietly, rubbing his sore wrists. Before Officer Brennan could answer, another police car pulled up at the edge of the park. The crowd parted as an older officer with captain's bars on his uniform approached. His face was lined with age and experience, his steps deliberate and purposeful. What's the situation here, Brennan? The newcomer asked, his eyes taking in the scene. The young boy sitting on the curb, the scattered contents of a backpack, the crowd with phones recording, and his officer standing awkwardly in the middle of it all. The gathering crowd fell silent, waiting to see what would happen next. The captain's presence changed the atmosphere instantly. His salt and pepper hair and weathered face suggested years of experience. The name on his badge read Captain Thornton. He surveyed the scene with sharp eyes, taking in the scattered backpack contents, the crowd of concerned onlookers, and Darius still sitting on the curb, rubbing his wrists. I asked you a question. Officer Brennan, the captain said, his voice calm but firm. What's the situation here? Officer Brennan straightened his posture. Sir, I was responding to the break-in reports. This juvenile matched the general description. Ms. Rivera stepped forward. Captain, I'm Elena Rivera, attorney. Your officer handcuffed this child without probable cause. We just heard over the radio that the actual suspect has been apprehended elsewhere. A white teenager in a red hoodie, not a black child on a bicycle. The captain's expression remained neutral, but his eyes flickered briefly to Officer Brennan, who looked away. Is that accurate, officer? Captain Thornton asked. The description was vague, sir. I was being thorough. A ripple of disbelief ran through the crowd. The woman in the red jogging suit, still recording, scoffed loudly. The captain turned to Darius, his tone softening. Son, are you hurt? Darius shook his head. No, sir. My wrists just feel sore from the handcuffs. What's your name? Darius Jackson, sir. I live on Maple Street with my mom and little sister. Captain Thornton nodded and knelt to help gather Darius's belongings, picking up the math textbook and folder. The simple act of dignity wasn't lost on the watching crowd. He handed them back to Darius, who accepted them with shaking hands. Captain, called a voice from the crowd. It was Mr. Patel from the corner store. This boy comes to my shop almost every day after school. Always polite, always honest. His mother works at the community health center. They are good people. Others began to speak up. I've seen him helping elderly neighbors with their groceries, added an older woman. He shoveled my walkway last winter without even being asked, said another. Captain. Thornton listened, nodding. I appreciate you all speaking up for him. He turned back to Darius. Do you have someone we can call to come get you? Before Darius could answer, a familiar voice called out, Darius. The crowd parted to reveal a woman rushing forward, panic etched on her face. It was his mother, Lisa Jackson, still wearing her medical scrubs from work. Mom! Darius's voice cracked with relief. Lisa rushed to her son, wrapping him in a tight embrace before pulling back to examine him. Are you okay? Mrs. Thompson called me. She said police had you in handcuffs in the park. What happened? Darius struggled to find words, overwhelmed by his mother's presence. Captain Thornton stepped forward. Ms. Jackson, I'm Captain Thornton. There's been an unfortunate misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Lisa's voice rose. My 12-year-old son was handcuffed in public. That's not a misunderstanding, that's harassment. The crowd murmured in agreement. More people had gathered, some neighbors who recognized Darius and his mother, others drawn by the commotion. Someone had brought Darius a bottle of water, which he sipped gratefully. Ms. Rivera touched Lisa's arm gently. I've been here for part of it. Your son was detained without cause, and I believe we have grounds for a formal complaint. Officer Brennan shifted uncomfortably. I was following protocol based on the description. What description exactly? Lisa interrupted, her eyes flashing. Because I just heard the actual suspect was white. My son is clearly not. Captain Thornton raised a hand. Ms. Jackson, you have every right to be upset. I assure you this incident will be thoroughly reviewed. He turned to Officer Brennan. You're dismissed from this scene. Return to the station and prepare a complete report of this incident. Officer Brennan's face flushed. But sir, that's an order, officer. The crowd watched as Officer Brennan reluctantly walked back to his cruiser. Some people clapped, others filmed his departure. The tension in the air eased slightly, but the underlying anger remained. A middle-aged man stepped forward from the crowd. Captain, my name is Kevin Washington. I'm on the neighborhood council. This isn't the first time we've had issues with Officer Brennan. Several residents have reported similar incidents of profiling. Others nodded in agreement. My son was stopped. Twice in 1 week just for walking home from basketball practice. I'm another parent. Added. He questioned my nephew for sitting in his own car waiting for me, said an elderly woman. Captain Thornton looked troubled. I'd like to hear these accounts formally. Each one of them. He pulled out a business card and handed it to Mr. Washington. Please have anyone with a similar experience contact me directly. Lisa, who had been listening while holding Darius close, spoke up again. What happens now, Captain? How do I know my son will be safe the next time he rides his bike through his own neighborhood? It was a question that hung in the air, one that many parents of black children had asked before. The crowd grew quiet, waiting for the captain's response. Ms. Jackson, I can't undo what happened today. Captain Thornton began, choosing his words carefully. But I can promise you this won't be swept under the rug. Officer Brennan's conduct will be reviewed, and appropriate disciplinary action will be taken. We've heard promises before, someone called out from the back of the crowd. The captain nodded, acknowledging the skepticism. You have. And too often they've been empty. I understand why you wouldn't trust my word alone. He paused, looking around at the gathered faces. That's why I'm inviting community members to join the review process. We need transparency. This unexpected suggestion caused a stir among the onlookers. Are you serious? Asked Ms. Rivera, raising an eyebrow. Community oversight? Completely serious, the captain confirmed. Police work should be accountable to the people we serve. What happened today reflects a breakdown in that relationship that needs to be addressed. Lisa studied the captain's face, looking for any sign of insincerity. I want to believe you, Captain. But I need to see action, not just words. I understand. Would you and your son be willing to file a formal statement about today's incident? It would be the first step in the official review. Lisa looked down at Darius, who had been quietly listening to the adults talk about him. What do you think, honey? Do you feel up to telling your story? Darius took a deep breath. The fear from earlier had faded, replaced by something else. A sense that what had happened to him mattered, that his voice mattered. Yes, he said finally. I want to tell what happened. Captain Thornton nodded with approval. Your courage is admirable, young man. The crowd had grown larger, with some people live-streaming the interaction on social media. What had started as one boy's humiliation was transforming into something larger, a moment of community solidarity and potential change. A young woman pushed forward through the crowd. Captain, I got everything on video from when the officer first stopped Darius until now. I'd like to submit it as evidence. That would be helpful. Thank you, the captain replied, passing her his card as well. Mr. Washington, the neighborhood council member, raised his voice to address the gathering. I propose we hold an emergency community meeting tonight. This incident affects us all, and we need to discuss next steps as a neighborhood. Agreement rippled through the crowd. People exchanged phone numbers and social media information, organizing in real time. Throughout it all, Darius remained close to his mother, watching with a mixture of confusion and awe as his personal ordeal sparked such a powerful response from neighbors. Some he knew and many he didn't. The fear and shame he'd felt earlier hadn't completely disappeared, but they were now joined by something unexpected, a sense of being valued and protected by his community. Captain Thornton made a phone call, speaking quietly into his radio. When he finished, he approached Lisa and Darius again. I've arranged for an officer I trust, Lieutenant Rodriguez, to take your statement whenever you feel ready. She's excellent with younger witnesses and takes these matters very seriously. Thank you, Lisa replied, still guarded but noticeably less hostile. We'll go home first, get Darius something to eat and let him rest a bit. The captain nodded. Of course. Take the time you need. As the crowd began to disperse, making plans for the community meeting, Ms. Rivera approached Lisa. I'd like to offer my services, pro bono if needed. What happened today shouldn't be allowed to happen again, to Darius or any other child. Lisa thanked her, accepting a business card. Finally, with Darius's belongings repacked and his bike beside him, mother and son prepared to head home. Before they left, Darius turned to Captain Thornton. Sir, can I ask you something? Of course, Officer Brennan. Will he still be a police officer after this? The captain considered the question carefully. That will depend partly on the investigation, partly on his willingness to acknowledge his mistakes and change. But I promise you this, his actions today won't be ignored. Darius nodded, processing this answer. As he and his mother walked away, the park slowly returning to its normal weekend rhythm, no one present could shake the feeling that something important had just begun, something that would not end with this one incident or this one afternoon. And as word spread through social media and text messages across the neighborhood, more people were heading to their community center, determined that this time things would be different. The community center buzzed with voices as people filed in, filling seats and lining the walls. What normally would have been a quiet Sunday evening had transformed into an impromptu town hall meeting. The clock on the wall read 7:15 p.m., and already the room was packed beyond capacity. Darius sat between his mother and his Uncle Ray, who had driven over as soon as he heard what happened. Though still shaken, Darius felt stronger with his family beside him. His little sister had stayed home with a neighbor, deemed too young for such a heavy discussion. At the front of the room, Mr. Washington from the neighborhood council tried to bring order to the crowded space. Folks, if we could all settle down, we need to get started. There are a lot of people who want to speak tonight. Gradually, the room quieted. Darius noticed Captain Thornton sitting quietly in the back corner, not in uniform but in casual clothes. Their eyes met briefly, and the captain gave him a small nod of acknowledgement. Mr. Washington continued, "I think we all know why we're here. What happened to young Darius in our park today has touched a nerve, because many of us have experienced similar treatment or fear it for our children. But tonight isn't just about sharing outrage. It's about finding a path forward." A middle-aged woman stood up without waiting to be called on. "My son is 16. Every time he leaves the house, I worry. Will today be the day he gets stopped? Will today be the day something goes wrong?" Her voice trembled with emotion. What happened to Darius could have happened to any of our children. Murmurs of agreement filled the room. A gray-haired man rose next. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 40 years. Things were supposed to have changed by now. My grandsons shouldn't have to face what I faced." One by one, people shared stories of being followed in stores, pulled over without cause, questioned while simply existing in their own neighborhood. The pattern was clear and painfully familiar. When it was Lisa's turn to speak, she stood tall, her voice steady despite her obvious anger. "My son is 12 years old. He's a straight-A student who helps his neighbors and looks after his sister. Today he was handcuffed and humiliated for riding his bike home." She paused, gathering herself. "I've taught him how to behave if stopped by police. I've had the talk with him, like many parents here. But should we have to? Should our children have to learn special rules just to stay safe in their own neighborhood?" The room fell silent, the question hanging heavy in the air. Ms. Rivera, the attorney, took the floor next. "I've been taking notes on the similar experiences many of you have shared tonight. There's a troubling pattern here, particularly involving Officer Brennan. From what I've gathered, at least 7 minors have been stopped by him in the past month alone, all Black or Latino, all without resulting charges." This revelation sent a fresh wave of anger through the room. Captain Thornton stood up then, and all eyes turned to him. He walked slowly to the front of the room, aware of the tension his presence created. "I want to thank you all for allowing me to be here tonight," he began. "I'm not here in an official capacity, but as someone who wants to listen and learn." He paused, scanning the room. "What happened today was wrong, full stop. And based on what I'm hearing, it wasn't an isolated incident." Someone from the back called out, "So what are you going to do about it?" The captain nodded, acknowledging the challenge. "First, I've opened a formal investigation into Officer Brennan's conduct. He's on administrative leave effective immediately. Second, I've requested all his body camera footage from the past 3 months for review. Third, I'm forming a civilian oversight committee to examine not just this case, but our department's policies and training." A skeptical murmur ran through the crowd. "Words are easy," said a young teacher Darius recognized from school. "We've heard promises before." "You're right to be skeptical," Captain Thornton admitted. "Which is why I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm asking for volunteers to serve on this committee, to have direct input and oversight." The room grew quiet as people exchanged glances. Surprised by this concrete offer of participation, Mr. Washington spoke up. "Captain, are you saying community members would have actual power in this process, not just advisory roles?" "Yes, real input, real consequences." Ms. Rivera stepped forward. "I'd like to volunteer my legal expertise for this committee." Others began to raise their hands as well. A retired judge, a civil rights activist, a high school counselor. Throughout all this, Darius had been listening quietly. The anger in the room was palpable, but so was something else, a sense of possibility of change. He leaned over to his mother and whispered something in her ear. She looked surprised, then proud, and nodded. Darius stood up, his heart pounding. The room fell silent as people noticed the young boy at the center of the day's events rising to speak. His voice cracked, and he swallowed hard. "I want to say something, if that's okay." Mr. Washington nodded encouragingly. "Of course, Darius. This is your story, too." Darius took a deep breath. "Today was really scary. When those handcuffs went on, I felt like I did something wrong, even though I knew I didn't." He paused, finding his words carefully. "But then people started standing up for me. People I know and people I've never met, and that felt important." The room was completely silent now, everyone focused on the 12-year-old's words. "I don't want other kids to feel like I felt today." Darius continued, his voice growing stronger. "I think maybe I should be part of this committee too. Not just adults talking about what happened, but actually hearing from kids like me. A woman near the front wiped away a tear. Mr. Washington looked to Captain Thornton, who nodded immediately. "I think that's an excellent idea," the captain said. "We absolutely need young people's perspectives in this process." Darius's uncle squeezed his shoulder gently, pride evident in his face. Just then, the door at the back of the community center opened, and heads turned to see a news crew entering. A reporter with a microphone approached Mr. Washington. "Excuse the interruption," she said. "I'm Lin Chen from Channel 8 News. We've been receiving calls about a community meeting regarding an incident of alleged police misconduct involving a minor. Would someone be willing to make a statement?" The room buzzed with renewed energy. What had started as a neighborhood matter was expanding, gaining attention beyond their community. Ms. Rivera stepped forward. "I can provide the basic facts with the family's permission." Lisa nodded, her arm around Darius protectively, as Ms. Rivera spoke quietly with the reporter. Captain Thornton approached Darius and his mother. "This is moving quickly," he said in a low voice. "Are you prepared for the attention this might bring?" Lisa straightened her shoulders. "If it means preventing another child from going through this, yes." The captain nodded thoughtfully. "There's something else you should know. I've been reviewing Officer Brennan's record quietly for some time. There have been other complaints, but they were handled internally." His expression darkened, "which means they weren't really handled at all. You're investigating one of your own officers?" Lisa asked, surprised. "The job is to protect and serve the community," Captain Thornton replied. "When an officer fails to do that, it's my responsibility to address it." He hesitated before adding, "What you may not know is that Officer Brennan's father was my partner years ago. His father was a good cop, one of the best I knew. It makes this situation complicated." This personal revelation caught both Lisa and Darius off guard. "Is that why you came to the park yourself?" Darius asked. The captain nodded. "When I heard the call about Officer Brennan detaining a juvenile, something didn't sit right. I've been concerned about his conduct for a while." Before they could discuss further, Mr. Washington called for everyone's attention again. "The news crew has asked if anyone would be willing to share their experiences on camera. This is voluntary, of course, but it could help get our message out." Several people raised their hands immediately, eager to tell their stories. As the meeting reorganized around the news crew's presence, Darius watched the community mobilizing in real time. People exchanging contact information, signing up for committees, drafting demands for the police department. The anger that had filled the room earlier was transforming into something more powerful: collective action. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was his friend Tyler. "Dude, you're trending on social media. The video of what happened has over 50,000 views already. Are you okay?" Darius looked up at the adults around him, all focused on turning his traumatic experience into meaningful change. For the first time since those handcuffs had closed around his wrists, he felt something like hope. "Yeah," he texted back. "I think I'm going to be." 2 weeks had passed since that fateful day in the park. The community center conference room was quieter than the town hall meeting had been, but the atmosphere was no less intense. Around a long wooden table sat the newly formed Civilian Oversight Committee: Ms. Rivera, the retired judge Mr. Harmon, community organizer Mrs. Diaz, high school counselor Dr. Powell, Mr. Washington from the neighborhood council, and notably Darius. At the head of the table, Captain Thornton stood next to a screen displaying a paused body camera video. His expression was grim. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "What you're about to see is difficult but important. These are selections from Officer Brennan's body camera footage from the past 3 months." Darius shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His mother sat directly behind him, a reassuring presence. The committee members had agreed that Darius could participate in the review, but his mother had insisted on being present. "Before we begin," Captain Thornton continued, "I want to acknowledge that this process is unusual. Typically, these reviews happen internally. But the events of 2 weeks ago have made it clear that transparency is essential for rebuilding trust." He pressed play on the first video clip. The footage showed Officer Brennan approaching 2 young black teenagers sitting on a bench near the community pool. Though they were simply talking and eating snacks, Officer Brennan's voice was immediately confrontational. "What are you two doing here? Let me see some ID." The committee watched in silence as the scene unfolded. The teenagers explaining they were waiting for their swim practice, showing their pool passes, Officer Brennan calling in their names to check for warrants despite their young age. Clip after clip showed a disturbing pattern. A Latino boy stopped while walking his dog. A black teenager questioned for looking suspicious while waiting at a bus stop. A group of middle school kids dispersed from a basketball court hours before curfew. In each instance, Officer Brennan's approach was aggressive, his suspicion unfounded, his treatment disparate from how he interacted with white residents in other clips. Ms. Rivera took careful notes, her legal training evident in her methodical documentation. Mr. Harmon, the retired judge, removed his glasses several times to rub his eyes, clearly troubled by what he was seeing. When they reached the footage of Darius's detention, the boy stiffened. Seeing the incident from the officer's perspective was surreal. Hearing how Officer Brennan had described him over the radio, watching his own fear and confusion play out on screen. When the videos ended, the room remained silent for a long moment. Dr. Powell was the first to speak. The psychological impact of these encounters on these young people, she trailed off, shaking her head. Even when they don't end in arrest, the trauma is real. 7 stops of minority youths in 3 weeks, all without cause, Ms. Rivera summarized, reviewing her notes. And not a single similar stop of a white juvenile in the same time period. The pattern is undeniable, Mr. Harmon agreed. This isn't about one bad day or one misunderstanding. This is systematic, Captain Thornton nodded grimly. There's more. We've reviewed Officer Brennan's complete record. There have been 6 formal complaints against him in the past year, all filed by minority residents, all dismissed by the previous captain as unfounded. Mrs. Diaz leaned forward. And what happened to that captain? Retired last month, Captain Thornton replied, which is why these cases are being reopened under my authority. Darius had been quiet throughout the viewing, processing everything he'd seen. Now he spoke up. The way he talked to all of us. It's like he already decided we were criminals before he even talked to us. The adults in the room turned to him with respect, acknowledging the insight. That's exactly right, Captain Thornton said. What we're seeing here is textbook biased policing. Officer Brennan consistently applied different standards to different residents based solely on their race. So what happens now? Mr. Washington asked the question on everyone's mind. Captain Thornton laid a folder on the table. Based on this evidence, I'm recommending Officer Brennan's termination. The full report is here, including my formal findings. Before I submit it officially, I wanted this committee to review it and add your recommendations. The committee members exchanged surprised glances. This level of involvement in police discipline was unprecedented. You're actually giving us input on the final decision? Mrs. Diaz asked skeptically. Yes, Captain Thornton confirmed. Your additions will be submitted as part of the official record. This isn't for show. As the committee began reviewing the report, there was a knock at the conference room door. A police department administrator entered and whispered something to Captain Thornton. His expression changed subtly. I've just been informed that Channel 8 News will be airing a special report tonight on what they're calling the Riverdale Park incident, he announced to the room. They've apparently obtained additional footage from bystanders that we haven't seen. This story isn't going away, Mr. Washington said. It's getting bigger. Ms. Rivera looked thoughtful. That could be good. Public pressure can drive institutional change in ways internal processes sometimes can't. Outside the conference room, the police station buzzed with unusual activity. Word had spread about the Civilian Oversight Committee meeting, and reporters had gathered in the lobby hoping for updates. What had started as one incident in a park had catalyzed something much larger. After 2 hours of deliberation, the committee emerged from the conference room. Captain Thornton approached the small podium that had been set up for a press statement, flanked by committee members. Darius and his mother stood slightly apart watching. Good afternoon, Captain Thornton began. 2 weeks ago, an incident occurred in our community that raised serious concerns about policing practices. Today I'm announcing several actions being taken in response. Cameras flashed as reporters captured the moment. First, Officer Richard Brennan has been terminated from the Riverdale Police Department, effective immediately. Our investigation revealed a pattern of biased policing that violated department policy, community trust, and the civil rights of multiple residents. A murmur ran through the gathered crowd. Second, We will be reviewing all complaints filed against our department in the past 3 years to ensure they were properly investigated. Third, we are implementing mandatory bias training for all officers, with community input on the curriculum. And finally, this civilian oversight committee will become a permanent fixture in our department's operations, with regular public meetings and real authority to review police conduct. As Captain Thornton continued outlining the changes, Darius felt a complex mix of emotions. There was vindication that Officer Brennan was being held accountable, but also sadness that so many kids like him had faced similar treatment. It felt like both an ending and a beginning. A reporter raised her hand. "Captain, this level of transparency is unusual for a police department. What prompted such a dramatic change in approach?" Captain Thornton glanced at Darius before answering. "Sometimes it takes seeing something through fresh eyes to recognize a problem that's been there all along. The courage of a 12-year-old boy and this community's response reminded me what policing should be, about one serving and protecting everyone. Equally," another reporter called out, "Can we hear from the young man at the center of this case?" All eyes turned to Darius. His mother squeezed his shoulder, silently asking if he wanted to speak. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded and approached the microphone, which Captain Thornton lowered for him. "I just want to say," Darius began, his voice small but steady, "that when this happened, I felt alone and scared. But then people stood up for me, neighbors, strangers, even Captain Thornton. And now something good is happening because of something bad that happened to me." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I don't think one kid should have to go through something scary to make things better. But since it happened, I'm glad it's changing things for other kids too." The simplicity and honesty of his words resonated through the room. Several reporters were visibly moved. As they left the police station, Darius and his mother were surprised to see a small crowd waiting. Neighbors, community members, even some of his teachers had gathered in support. "You did good in there, kid," his Uncle Ray said, giving him a fist bump. That evening, the Jackson family gathered around their television to watch the Channel 8 special report. The segment was more comprehensive than they had expected, including interviews with other youths who had encountered Officer Brennan, statements from civil rights experts, and analysis of racial disparities in policing nationwide. What had happened to Darius was being placed in a larger context, not dismissed as an isolated incident, but recognized as part of a pattern that affected communities across the country. As the report ended, Darius's phone lit up with messages from friends who had watched it too. One message particularly caught his attention, from Tyler, whose house he had been visiting the day everything happened. "Dude," the message read, "my dad says you're changing history. That's pretty cool." Darius stared at the message for a long moment, then looked up at his mother, who was fielding calls from family members who had seen the report. "Mom," he said quietly, "I think I want to be a lawyer when I grow up." "Like Ms. Rivera," Lisa smiled, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and lingering sadness that her son had been forced to grow up a little faster because of what had happened. "You'd make an excellent lawyer," she said, "but right now you still get to be a kid. Don't forget that part, okay?" Darius nodded, but they both knew that after everything that had happened, things would never be quite the same again. And maybe, just maybe, that wasn't entirely a bad thing. 6 months had passed since that afternoon in the park. The community center auditorium was packed once again, but the atmosphere couldn't have been more different from the tense town hall meeting that had followed Darius's detention. Today there was a buzz of anticipation in the air, with rows of chairs filled and people standing along the walls. Darius stood backstage, fidgeting with the note cards in his hands. He was wearing a button-up shirt his mother had ironed that morning, and his new glasses kept sliding down his nose when he looked down to read his speech. "Nervous?" asked a familiar voice. Captain Thornton, now Chief Thornton since the retirement of the previous police chief, stood nearby in his formal uniform. Darius nodded. "A little. There's so many people out there. You've earned the right to be heard by all of them," the chief said. "But remember, you don't owe anyone your story. You're doing this because you want to, right?" "Yeah," Darius confirmed. "I want to." In the months since Officer Brennan's termination, Darius had gradually moved from being the boy from the park incident back to just being himself, a student, a brother, a friend. But he was also something new now, an advocate. The youth program he had helped create was launching today, and somehow he had been chosen to give the opening speech. Mr. Washington stepped up to the microphone on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming today. 6 months ago, our community faced a difficult moment that forced us to confront uncomfortable truths about policing and race. But instead of letting that moment divide us, we chose to use it as a catalyst for meaningful change. The audience applauded. The Youth Police Dialogue program we're launching today is the result of countless hours of work by community members, police officers, and most importantly, young people themselves. To tell you more about it, I'd like to introduce one of its founders who knows better than most why this work matters. Please welcome Darius Jackson. Darius took a deep breath and walked onto the stage. The lights were bright and he could barely make out individual faces in the crowd. But he spotted his mother and sister in the front row, his Uncle Ray giving him a thumbs up, and several of his friends from school who had joined the youth committee. "Hi," he began, his voice cracking slightly before he steadied himself. "My name is Darius. 6 months ago, I was handcuffed in Riverdale Park for riding my bike home. I was 12 years old. A hush fell over the room. That day changed my life in ways I never expected. At first, I was scared and angry. I didn't want to go back to the park. I didn't trust police officers. I felt like I had done something wrong, even though I knew I hadn't." Darius paused, taking a sip of water. But something else happened, too. People stood up for me. Neighbors, strangers, even police officers like Chief Thornton. And they kept standing up, not just that day, but in all the days that followed. They showed me that one bad experience doesn't have to be the end of the story. He glanced down at his cards, but then decided to speak from his heart instead. Over the past 6 months, I've been part of a youth committee that meets with police officers every week. At first it was awkward. We didn't trust them, and maybe they were uncomfortable too. But we kept talking. We shared our experiences, not just the bad ones, but all the things that make up our lives. And the officers shared theirs too. The audience listened intently as Darius continued. What we realized is that we all want the same thing, to feel safe in our community, but we can't feel safe if we don't understand each other. That's why we created this program. He gestured to the side of the stage, where a group of teenagers and police officers stood together, ready to be introduced. The Youth Police Dialogue program isn't just about talking. It's about listening. It's about walking in each other's shoes. And it's about making real changes based on what we learn. Darius explained how the program would work. Regular meetings between youth and officers, community ride-alongs, police station tours, recreational activities, and ongoing training for officers on interacting with young people. Since we started this work, reports of negative interactions between police and youth in our neighborhood have gone down by 60%, he said, pride evident in his voice. That doesn't mean everything is fixed. We still have a lot of work to do, but it's a start. As he concluded his speech, Darius looked directly at the audience. What happened to me that day was wrong, but what's happened since then has been right. And I believe that if we keep working together, young people, adults, police officers, everyone, we can build the kind of community where no child feels afraid just for being themselves. Thank you. The applause was immediate and thunderous. People rose to their feet, many wiping away tears. Darius's mother beamed with pride, while his little sister jumped up and down, clapping wildly. After the formal presentation, the community center buzzed with activity as people mingled, examining displays about the program and signing up to participate. Darius found himself surrounded by well-wishers and reporters asking for comments. In a quiet corner of the room, Chief Thornton stood with Ms. Rivera, watching the scene. "He's quite the speaker," the chief observed. "He's going to make one hell of a lawyer someday," Ms. Rivera agreed. Speaking of which, the class action lawsuit settlement came through yesterday. The department's insurance is covering it, but the policy changes are binding. The lawsuit had been filed on behalf of all the minors who had been unlawfully stopped by Officer Brennan and 2 other officers with similar patterns. While the financial settlement was significant, the real victory had been in the mandatory policy changes it secured. Good. The chief nodded. And the new hiring panel? First meeting next week. Having community members involved in officer selection is going to make a big difference in the long run. Their conversation was interrupted when Darius approached with his mother and uncle. "Chief Thornton, Lisa said, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming today." The relationship between them had evolved over the months, from adversaries to cautious allies to something approaching friendship. The changes in the police department under Thornton's leadership had been significant, if imperfect. "I wouldn't have missed it," the chief replied, shaking her hand warmly before turning to Darius. "That was a powerful speech, young man." "Thanks," Darius said, looking more relaxed now that the formal presentation was over. "Did you see how many people signed up already?" "I did. You've started something important here." A photographer from the local paper approached, asking for a picture of Darius with the chief and the other youth program leaders. As they posed together, the boy who had been wrongfully detained and the police leader who had helped create change, there was a sense of how far they had all come. Later that evening, as the Jackson family walked home from the community center, Darius was unusually quiet. "Everything okay?" his mother asked, concerned. "Yeah," he said, looking up at the darkening sky. "I was just thinking about something Chief Thornton said to me once. He said sometimes it takes seeing things through fresh eyes to recognize problems that have been there all along." Lisa nodded, waiting for him to continue. "I think that's what we're doing with this program. We're helping everyone see things differently, the kids and the officers. And maybe that's how things really change, you know? Not all at once, but person by person. Conversation by conversation." His mother wrapped an arm around his shoulders, struck by the wisdom in her son's words. The incident that had caused him so much pain had also awakened something in him. A sense of purpose, a belief in his own voice. "I'm so proud of you," she said simply. As they turned onto their street, they saw Mr. Patel from the corner store waving from his doorway. "Darius," he called out. "I saw you on the local news." "Our neighborhood celebrity." Darius grinned, embarrassed but pleased. "Your program, is it only for teenagers?" "My nephew is 10, but he's been asking about it." "We're starting a junior group next month," Darius explained. "He'd be perfect for that." As they continued their conversation, more neighbors emerged from their homes, drawn by the familiar voices. Mrs. Chen brought out cookies she'd just baked. The Rodriguez kids ran over to play with Darius's little sister. Soon, an impromptu gathering had formed on the sidewalk. Exactly the kind of community connection that had been strengthened in the wake of the incident. Standing slightly apart, watching her son chat animatedly with neighbors about the program, Lisa felt a complex mix of emotions. There was still anger about what he had experienced, still worry about his future in a world where such incidents remained all too common. But there was also hope. Hope in the changes they had helped create. Hope in the community that had rallied around them, and most of all, hope in Darius himself. The boy who had been handcuffed in the park 6 months ago had found his voice and people were listening. That didn't erase the injustice he had faced, but it had transformed it into something powerful, a catalyst for change that would ripple outward in ways none of them could fully predict. As the evening deepened and stars appeared overhead, the neighbors gradually dispersed to their homes, carrying with them a renewed sense of connection and purpose. And Darius, walking up the steps to his front porch, carried something equally precious, the knowledge that even the most painful moments could become bridges to a better future.